start. Okay. Welcome to Parshat Terumah. And Parshat Terumah is a movement away from the revelation, right? So 2 weeks ago in Yitro, we heard the 10 Commandments amidst great thunder and lightning and all of those things. And then last week's Parshat Mishpatim is a continuation of what we call the theophany, one of my favorite religious words. And there's still a very direct divine communication. And now we're starting in this new world. We have the 10 Commandments. We've declared that we are God's people. We've accepted God. And it's like this really big high. And what do? We start building the Mishkan. And so I think there's like a little bit of a feeling of a letdown as we start this week's Parsha, because we've left this high moment, like the wedding, so to speak. And now we're talking about how to design the kitchen of our new house together. And it feels like these are details and maybe they're not like exciting details. And so before we look at the source sheet, and I'll share the source sheet into the meeting in case people want to have it on their own screen, which is about the shulchan, one of the things that we build in, or we get the instructions for how to build in this week's Parsha, is to say it's like an abrupt movement from the drama of this acceptance and this incredibly close divine relationship to moving into the details of how many cubic feet the table should be. And so I think that before we even go into those details, the Ramban has a beautiful idea that the Mishkan is the physical embodiment of that close relationship with God. And so the experience of revelation can't be every day, right? Like we have to go to work, we have to do our business in the world. We can't always be at Har Sinai, but that it's very hard to not be at Har Sinai and still feel God in our lives. And so the Mishkan is that space. It's like God is not saying like what color should the black splash of our kitchen be. God is saying, I want to keep going with you, and I know it will be hard for you people, Bnei Israel, to go on through the midbar and feel the close connection without a physical space for that. And so that is sort of the beautiful way of maybe looking at all the measurements of the Mishkan. Okay. So now I will open up the sheet here. And this is based on a shir that my teacher and mentor, Rabbi Sarah Hurwitz, gave many, many years ago, where she compares the Aron to as a model for how we should build community amongst ourselves. And so there are 4 points, and we'll walk through sort of each of the sources and think about, I don't know what it means and whether it feels like an accurate representation. So as I said, the directions in this week's parsha are for building the Aron and the candelabra and the table in the Beit HaMikdash. And so this is talking about the Aron. And it says, V'asu Aron atzei shitim, they shall make an ark of acacia wood. Amatayim v'chetzi, 2.5 cubits long, arko, v'amad v'chetzi rechuvo, v'amad v'chetzi komato. So basically it's 2.5 by 2.5, 2.5 by 1.5 by 1.5 measurements, these cubit lengths. And the Shnei Lupot Tabrit, which is a beautiful commentary, he asks why this would be. So he says, Timatzeh b'ma'aseh ha'aron, ramazim al esek ha'torah v'lomdeha, he'ach it nahagu. The details of the construction of the Aron allude to one's preoccupation with Torah and those who study it, and how they should conduct themselves. So what does that mean? Like what is he seeing that we don't necessarily see, right? In this, I don't see anything about Torah learning here. He says all the measurements Let's see. Kol amot Aron hayu shvurim, right? It's not 1 by 2 by 2 or 2 by 1 by 1. It's 2.5 by 1.5 by 1.5. Each of the measurements is a fraction. Ki amatayim v'chetzi arko v'ama v'chetzi v'ama v'chetzi komato, right? Roma is the Baal Torah she'achez ba'anava v'hiyeh libo nishbar b'kirbo v'lo yitzga'eh. That all the measurements are expressed in these fractions because it is a hint that those who study Torah should practice modesty and humility, and they should relate to it with a broken heart. This is like a big Hasidic idea of the broken heart. I talked about it with the broken luchot, right? So their brokenheartedness will bring them closer to Torah. And it is a remez that they should not brag about their accomplishments as scholars. So the Shnei Luchot Habrit sees the Aron as a representation of what it means to be a Torah learner. And I would say maybe what it means to be a community member, which is to measure yourself in half measurements. Never to say you take up the full amount of space, but to make a space, to be modest, to make that half cubit of space, whatever it is, for other people or for future learning and growth of your own. And so that it's very specific. It's not like an IKEA, Aron that has to fit in a certain spot, but God Dafka measures things in half meters to give this lesson over about always seeing ourselves as maybe a little broken or a little space to grow, and to be a little tzimtzum, to contract ourselves into a half, to say there's always room for everyone. So that's idea number 1. Idea number 2 comes from 2 psukim in this week's parsha. Right, this is from 25:10. Here we are a little bit later in the parsha, where it says "Va'asita shulchan, va'asita menorah," right? That you shall make me the table, and you shall make me the menorah, the candelabra, right? The other 2 things made in the Mishkan. But the Midrash Tanchuma notes, not on our parsha, but somewhere else in V'yakel, it notes Va'al ha'aron amar va'asu, right? So the first person perspective, the person perspective, whatever we say, right, is singular when it comes to the table and the lamp. But the Midrash notes for the Aron, it says va'asu, right? That everyone, they shall make, plural tense. Lama, why would they do that? That God commanded everyone to make the Aron. Right? He commanded all of the Israelites to make it so that one of them would not be able to humiliate his fellow Israelite by saying, I contributed more for the building of the Aron than you. Therefore, I am more learned, right? Anilo made harbe, yesh li bo yoter mimcha. That I have like a bigger claim to that Aron. V'ata lo natata ba'aron klum, ela ma'at lefichach ein lecha chelek b'torah. Right, that I'm sure that everyone has been in a situation, whether it's a building campaign or a fundraiser, where the person who gives more money feels more entitled to a bigger space on the wall, or a bigger table at the dinner, or they want recognition in the pamphlet, the booklet, whatever the thing is, that when it comes to the Mishkan, this is a thing that so much has to belong to everyone, that God wanted it to be clear that no matter how much you gave, right? It says in our text that everyone gives kol nadav libo, to like the desire of their heart. And we know that everyone has different capabilities, but no one should feel that they have less of a portion of the Aron than someone else just because they gave more funding to the Aron. Right. So the second principle here is that it's like the community or the space of divine presence in our lives is for everyone. The mikdash is for everyone. Okay, moving on to number 3. Here, it talks about how the Aron is movable. Make poles of acacia wood and overlay them with gold. And you insert the poles into these rings on the side walls of the ark. If you ever look in the stone chumash, they have like very nice pictures of these things, right? But if you picture this box, which is a rectangle, right? 2.5 by 1.5 by 1.5, that there were rings that came out on the sides, and you sort of slid the poles through the rings so that you could easily carry the Aron from place to place, right? Because the Mishkan is not the Beit HaMikdash. The Mishkan is a movable thing. And in fact, what it says here in the text, which might seem sort of extra on some levels, but tabaot ha'aron yihu badim velo yasuru mimenu. The poles remain in the rings of the ark; they shall not be removed from it. The way I think about that is a little bit like if you go on a trip and you come back with your suitcase, but you know you're going on another trip in 2 days, you don't put your suitcase away, right? You just leave it on your floor and you take out the clothes and put in new clothes, because you know you're going to be on the move. Whereas if you only go on a trip once a year, you empty out your suitcase, you put it away in your closet because you know you're not going to use it. And what the Torah is telling us is you're always going to be on the move. Don't bother taking the poles out of the Aron. The Aron is meant to move. Professor Yeshayahu Leibowitz, who is an Israeli author and thinker, our time, a contemporary, wrote in his Ha'arot LaParshat HaShavua, which is a beautiful book, unfortunately published only in Hebrew, but I have this lovely translation here. He says that the ark, which symbolizes the Torah, is essentially made to be carried from place to place. Therefore, the poles remain fixed to it. The Torah is not bound to any particular place. It is the Torah of man, the Zot Torah Adam, wherever he may be, right? Wherever we go, the Torah comes with us. Therefore, the ark is made in such a way as to show that by its very nature, it can be carried from place to place. And we never put it down, so to speak, from that way. And I think that this is a beautiful idea, right? Which is to say that the Torah moves with a community. It's like I imagine like a dance, a symphony of sorts, right? Like as the community steps in one direction, the Torah moves with it. The Aron moves with us. And we don't have to worry that we're leaving the Torah behind. The Torah is made to travel. So that is point 3. Now here, this is a fascinating link. I hope it still works here. There's a question in the Gemara in Sota. It talks about the bearers of the Aron, right? That there were people who there were people who carried the Aron from place to place, right? Because it was movable, as I said. Yes, I know. I got you. And so the Gemara in Sota says that Nasa Aron et Nosav, which is a super interesting idea that the ark bore its bearers. So I found this link. I'm going to click on it. I'm going to take us there to how heavy the Aron was, right? There are people in Israel who have built many of these items to the scale that they believe is appropriate. Hold on. It has the measurements here. The weight of the Ark of the Covenant, including the weight of the gold overlay, that the weight was at about 288 pounds, right? And that is too heavy for four men to carry on their shoulders, right? Because you have to imagine it's like each one takes a spot where the ring is, right? And that this conclusion disturbed me because the ark was carried out many times on the shoulders of 4 men. So this is like an academic article. And I think what the Gemara in Sota would say is, okay, the Aron is 288 pounds, but the Aron bore its bearers. That like the Aron carries itself. Sort of reminds me, it's like a little bit cheesy, but I think it's beautiful. So hopefully no one's offended that I called it cheesy, but there's like a card that talks about a guy who gets up to heaven and he sees his footprints going along the way, right? And he sees 2 sets of footprints in some places. And he says, God, who is that other set of footprints? And God says, oh, that was me. I walked alongside you, or you walked alongside me. And the guy looks at sort of each spot on the map and he says, but God, the hardest times, where were you? Like, I'm all alone. It's just my set of footprints. And God says, no, that's my set of footprints, right? I carried you through those times. You couldn't even walk then, right? It sort of reminds me of that. Like the Aron is the set of footprints and the 4 people sort of just glide like alongside, like a moving staircase or something, so that they could carry the weight of such a heavy Aron. It's an interesting, I think it's a very elegant solution to this problem, right? The rabbis of the Gemara have figured out this is quite a heavy thing. And instead of saying it was a miracle, which is what they're saying, right? Like God did this. They imbue the Aron and the Aron as a representation of Torah or as community as being something that can carry its own weight, that can not just move itself, but can move other people along with it, right? The four people who are sort of toiling under it at that time. So I want to sum them up, and then I would love to hear what people have to say. So Rabbi Sarah sums them up for us, right? That the ingredients of community are one, this half cubit, measure, which is to acknowledge that no one is perfect, right? If I am 1.5 and Elizabeth is 1.5, we make 3, right? We make a full number. We must rely on each other to be complete. Number 2 is the idea of va'asuli et hamikdash, et ha'aron, but not va'asita, right? That no one person is better than anyone else. We all are merited to receive and participate in Torah in this way. That God specifically wanted the Aron and the Torah to be the most sort of inclusive point. Step 3, that the Torah or the Aron is not meant to be stagnant, right? It's meant to move with the people. There's a very beautiful drash on this idea that halacha, right? The word for Jewish law comes from the word halach, that in our post-Holocaust world, we have frozen a lot of halacha in time. Especially when it came to writing things down, but that for years and years and years, it evolved as the community evolved, as technology evolves. We have to let halacha evolve. Pretty soon, no one's going to be able to open a door without some kind of electricity. So flush a toilet, whatever the things are, right? That halacha has to move with us wherever we are. And that step 4, when all of those first 3 steps are executed properly, right? When we've constructed the Aron to the right measurements, with the poles, all of us together, that then the Aron it moves with us. It's not a burden. It is rather the thing that carries us along our way. So I think, what I admired most about this when I first heard it, probably 8 years ago, was that Rabbi Sarah took what is a kind of boring thing, right? This arc of acacia wood with its rings and its measurements, and made it into this really beautiful, I thought, message or a vibrancy to it. And I also think that we often think of the Mishkan as outdated, right? There's a big question whether we'll do korbanot in the next iteration of the Beit HaMikdash that should come soon in our days, or will it be something else? But when you boil it down, it's not about the incense and the sacrifices. It's about the values that stand behind those things. And so I think those things are certainly everlasting in that way. And hopefully, inspiring. And I love this idea that you should leave a half measurement of space in front of you, whether it's for your own growth or for someone else in the community. So I'm going to stop talking and let other people share. Anyone have any thoughts or ideas? Questions? I ran through it quickly. Sorry. I charged ahead. I was worried about being late.
The only thought, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. The only thought I have was about the conclusion that 288 pounds is too heavy for 4 men. I'm not sure. I mean, because the picture that comes to mind for me, of course, is pallbearers, and certainly, at least non-Jewish coffins, and there are people that weigh 200 pounds or more, but whether it's 4 or 6 people, it's you can still take the symbolism of community, or that not doing it alone. So
totally. And he even tries to say it was even less weight, right? It was 183 pounds. Yeah, I thought, well, 72 pounds, that's probably the size of a big child, right? Like a 10-year-old or 11-year-old. I don't know. And lots of people carry their kids around.
Yeah.
Maybe it's because it's totally dead weight as opposed to a child. Yeah, it's a fair point.
Yeah.
But I thought it was funny that people even just spent so much time, right? I think that for me, we're entering this period. I even saw someone post on Facebook oh, now I space out until Breshit starts again, right? The story as one cohesive narrative is starting to draw to a close. And so this part can feel sort of out of touch, but there are people for whom this is really important and they really try to figure out, I when I lived in Israel, I lived in the old city of Jerusalem. And so I went to the Temple Institute, and it's amazing. I mean, they have the water jugs that the Levim pour water from, and they have the little scepters that you put the incense in. And I mean, down to like the last detail. And as Kathy is pointing out, who's to say who knows exactly how many pounds or inches something actually was? But the fact that it's like very alive for some people is kind of cool.
Well, that's kind of the point of community also, which is different things appeal to different people, and
Yeah.
various people have attractions that can help. So yeah.
Yeah. Lovely. Awesome. Well, I hope people will not be too bored and shul by all the measurements and the dry pieces. We always have the Eagle has a have to liven things up in a few chapters. Um, and I think it's also that we're going to come back to this in a few parshiot, because first we get the directions and then we actually implement the directions. So this is the giving of the directions, and maybe we'll find something else about the Aron to say at the implementation level. But until then, let me turn off the recording because I see so many. Let's see.